I appreciate the introduction. My name again is Greg Shelton. I'm with Horak Talley. I'm a construction lawyer, and I'm going to be talking to you today about photography on construction projects, documenting what's going on out there, protecting yourself, helping us protect you, etc. Thing about what is a construction lawyer, I've talked to a number of you over the past day or two, and folks will ask, are you plaintiffs or defendants counsel? What do you do? And we really are, I guess, kind of specialized contract lawyers, but we deal with other things. We deal with insurance, suretyship, which are the bonds, payment performance bonds, torts, injury, not so much personal injury, but torts in terms of damaging other people's work, time, delay issues, all of that is construction law. And so I remember in law school when I had this cranky professor out of New Hampshire or Connecticut or somewhere, I forgot exactly where, but he was kind of, he was a curmudgeon, and everybody was afraid of him, but I just remember him saying, if you want to understand contracts, become a construction lawyer, because that's all we really, what we're governed by is the contract. And so when dealing with the contract, we're going to have events occur on a project that we'll want recorded for posterity to protect you because you have certain obligations, promises in the contract that you're exchanging with the person you're dealing with, whether it's the GC or the owner or your own subs. And so when we talk about documenting, we're really talking about, I want you all to think of what your role is not only builders, but you're also the historians of the project, particularly the superintendent, but also the project manager who's drafting the letters, the vice presidents who are dealing with the larger issues as they come up and dealing with notices and letters and that type of thing. Here we have the Bayeux Tapestry, which depicts the Battle of Hastings when William the Bastard became William the Conqueror in England, and this was produced after the battle. So this was the winner writing history. I want you to not think of history in that way. I want you to think of it as the winner wrote the history, okay? The winner of the battle, which is going to be a battle over change orders, delays, equipment failure, whatever, is the one who is doing a good job showing their side of the story as the story is unfolding. The Bayeux Tapestry is interesting because it's pre-camera, and yet we have this battle being shown in pictures. And we all know how powerful pictures are. I don't need to tell you. I was talking to Keith last night. There's this video going around called Kony 2012. Have you all heard of that video? Anybody heard of that? It's this kind of big news going around for a couple of guys that are trying to raise awareness about this obscure issue in Africa of this general, and they're using photographs and a lot of emotive video clips and music and all this to make their point. And it worked, I don't know that much. It's 30 minutes, I didn't watch it, but it's been effective for them. So visuals work. They're very effective to tell the story. When we talk about what's going on in court, and I'm just going to come around here because I'm going to have to use my laser pointer. When we talk about battles and court, we really need to talk about where we've come. We back when the Bayeux Tapestry was put together, we had this idea of the Anglo-Saxon common law, the Anglo-Saxon way of resolving disputes, and they used to do things like dunk people in water and make them hold iron, burning iron, and if they didn't die of the infection, then they were the winner. And then they went to the knight system, and then they went to physical combat. All these ways of dealing with disputes, which thankfully are no longer around. I guess The downside for you are attorney's fees, but I guess that beats dying of an infection. But here we go. We've got the evidence that we're going to present in this battle comes in a number of forms. And these are really our weapons and our ammunition when we go into a fight. We've got the objects, and that might be a criminal case of a murder weapon, something like that. They call that real evidence. We have, in construction, we have contract documents, obviously very important. Correspondence, critical to providing notice of a situation, giving your side of the situation. Mr. GC, I know it wasn't raining yesterday, but I could not compact the soil because it's mud. And as you know, you have to have the right, to get a good compaction, you have to have the right moisture content, and it has to be run with a Proctor test, and the Proctor test results would be off the charts if we ran it right now. So, that's protecting themselves. You also have testimony. That is the truest form of evidence. You have people coming into court, getting on the witness stand and testifying. You have video and, of course, photographs, which is the point of my discussion today. Video is very useful as well. I think it might be a little more difficult to manage for what you would need for the average contractor, steel erector. What I'm really aiming at today is a pretty simple camera assigned to a superintendent and maybe to a foreman and maybe to the project manager, whatever works for you guys. But a camera that they can take out and they know how to use, and they know when and how to use it, and then what to do with that information after they get back to the office. So with that, I wanted to kind of introduce you to the universe of photographs as evidence. We had those other sections, and they would have their similar kind of breakdown. But here within the realm of photography, we have issues that you all need to know about. One is the equipment. You can't take a photograph without a camera. Technical skills, and what I mean there is it's good. It's well enough to have a camera, but you need to know, does it have batteries? Do you know how to turn the date stamp on? Do you know how to take a photograph that's effective and not just meaningless? Do you know how to adjust the settings? Those types of things. The procedures, and I think this is where, from a management perspective, most of your interest might be in, is how do you manage all the data? And then through all these steps, we hope to get evidence if we're ever in a dispute. We'll have it handy. We'll have our history made in pictures. So that being said, we have the question of what and when to photograph. We can't just go out there and take constant photos, have all our workers and crew just shooting photographs because nothing would ever get done. Bless you. We have to have a smart strategy on what to photograph. And I would say that the best indication is when you feel like on a job, and this is human nature, it's like the example I would give is somebody walking down a sidewalk and somebody's behind them and they just get a sixth sense that something bad's about to happen. You get the same sense on a job when people won't look at you, there's having sub-meetings and you're kind of excluded, and you're going to be the fall guy. You're going to get blamed for the critical path. You're structural steel, and that's what's going to happen. So you now need to be in a mode of protecting yourself. And, if that offends the GC, if you're out there taking photographs, there are a lot of legitimate reasons to be taking photographs other than litigation. You need to know where your project is in terms of schedule. You need to, the project manager asked me for this. He just wanted to see where we were today. You don't have to be so brazen about it to say, I'm photographing now because I think you're about to screw me, okay? And if you're doing it the whole time, all along, it won't raise any questions. I mean, I have my phone up there. It's it's one of the Nexus 4S phones, and I can put it on silent and take a photograph of you guys now while it looks like I'm checking my email. You wouldn't even know it. So there are ways to do it, but make sure you do it. So what do we have? I have the when and where. I have regularly up here for a very important reason, which I'll get to. It's more technical later. But taking photographs regularly as a practice makes it a lot easier to get those photographs in to evidence. Because you can have a photograph that's taken on a good camera, no issues, nobody's messed with the photograph, and you can have a situation where you can't get that photograph into evidence because you have to jump through hoops to get a document in front of a jury or an arbitrator. A lot of the cases, arbitrators are much more relaxed about what they'll look at, but for today's purposes, let's assume you're going to trial in a federal court. We have, and this is one, tell me if I'm wrong, but staging, storage, where do you put your materials? How do you access the project? Is that something that you all run into a lot or no? It is? Who's usually in your way? Concrete? Who else? The site guys? Okay. Storm drain, culvert, catch basins out there? Okay. And how about access with the heavy equipment and the roads or the dirt roads? Are they able, is that an issue at all? Okay. All right. So we need to depict now how you guys can't get to the project. So when you get blamed for being, you're the skeleton. You can't build a body without a skeleton. So I would imagine you're going to be, public enemy number one for everybody else whenever there's a delay issue. And so I would want to show why you can't get to the site. And it's great to have a letter or fax or email, and buried within the third paragraph. Also, we are unable to get our materials onto the project because of the storm drain structures blocking our path, something like that. Now that's great. I mean, I love that, but if I've got a photograph of that, it's no longer some guy complaining about not getting to the site. The jury's not going to know what you're talking about. They're going to say he's complaining he can't get to the site. What does that mean? Just go around. But a photograph, that'll tell your story for you, okay? I remember a case I was litigating in, it was arbitration up in Boone, North Carolina, and it was an old World War II vet started a grading company with a bulldozer when he got out in the 40s and built it up into a huge company. And, well, I say huge company, a large grading company. And he had this, let's just say, sharp dealing owner out of Fort Lauderdale. And the owner knew all the tricks in the book about documenting. He had the aerial photographs. He had the letters. He had everything. And was complaining about the progress on this job, this retail shopping center type project. And all it took for us to tell our story was a photograph of the conditions on the site when he was getting screamed at. And it would, you show snow at 6 inches high, mud, and this guy's writing letters saying, you're delaying the project, get out there, double your efforts, and setting him up for a $1.3 million claim. So, and he didn't succeed on the claim, by the way. Those are the kind of things that you can get away with, and that's just one photograph that was used in that situation. So, in a way, you say a photograph's worth 1,000 words, it was really worth $1 million. And how long did it take to snap the photograph? So we have access interference. I would consider that similar to what we've been talking about. Manpower and equipment's always big on progress. Aerial photos are great for manpower and equipment, particularly for equipment, because well, I'll go back to that same project or the same dispute I just spoke about. The owner was taking a lot of aerial photographs, but the thing was, he was taking photographs of all of our excavators, dozers, backhoes, all that stuff. And so when we were being told we didn't have enough equipment or manpower, he proved our case for us. So in that way, it was a double-edged sword for him. And photographs are a double-edged sword for everybody, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Quality and quantity of work, that's where I wanted to talk about technical skills. And I'm going to go in depth with you about that, but when you're talking about defective work, in particular, and you've got a photograph of an item, and that's it really gets lost in the shuffle. We're going to want some sort of a narrative, some sort of a description about why you took that photograph. Take it from the owner's perspective. If there's an issue with the drywall work, if there's an issue with the concrete, the sidewalks, the flat work, cracks, that type of thing. Good photographs will tell that story for that owner better than a letter talking about cracks in the sidewalk. Of course, weather, we talked about that, and then site and soil, the same deal. So we have our project manager, superintendent, maybe a foreman out there with their cameras, and then we have the photographs downloaded to some sort of a server. What we need as lawyers is to get that photograph into court, and there are several steps we need to take to do that. And one is called authentication. Authentication requires a witness in court to authenticate a document, to say, yes, I see this photograph, and yes, it's genuine. It's not fake, it's not from another project, it is what it purports to be. And to do that, well, let's look here. First of all, excuse me? Oh, okay. First of all, I wanted to use this photograph to practice reading photographs. Who here thinks that this photograph was taken at 8 in the morning? Okay, how about noon? How about 5 p.m.? So a lot of 5 p.m. folks? Okay. Why do you all say that? Good, okay, good. All right, so if it's let's say it's 5 p.m., what direction is our photographer down here facing? Correct, okay. All right, and so here we have a record of the equipment that's out there. We see that the structure that is being dried in. It looks like they're doing some work down here. Those little things, when you see a photograph, it's like, okay, a bulldozer, okay, a guy sitting in a crane. There's always little details that you can infer. And with digital photographs in particular, it's much easier to know whether we're right or wrong. And I don't know if I have the answer to this photograph, but it sounds unanimous that this is an afternoon photograph. And I think the idea of the nobody on the equipment is a nice way of corroborating that. But to authenticate this photograph, this guy is going to be central because he's going to be able to go into court, get on the witness stand, get sworn in, and testify to these points. And this is the test. This is what you have to show to get a photograph into evidence. A witness familiar with the object or scene. A witness who explains why he or she is familiar with the object or scene. The witness recognizes the object or scene in the photo, and the photo is a fair and accurate depiction at the relevant time. And if the photo is in dispute, the lawyer trying to get the photo in is going to have to ask that witness these questions, and all of the answers have to be satisfactory for a judge to say, this really is the real deal. This isn't some fake, or this is. So when we think about what's necessary, we've got these services now. These you pay for them. They have cameras stationed all over the place, and they're taking periodic photographs of a project. Have you all heard of this system? There's also security type systems with cameras that'll pan. And I have not had a case where I've had to use those yet, but I think probably because those services are relatively recent, coming into being, and then the economy has obviously slowed down a lot of the larger types of hotel projects, condos that you'd expect them in. But let me ask, has anybody been on a project where this type of system was used? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's about what I'd expect. All right. You tell me, Greg, I don't need my guys out there, trying to be Ansel Adams when I've got all these automatic cameras going off recording everything. Well, problem for me there is I've got to get the photo in with a person. And so, let's just run this down. Let's run it down in the example we just looked at. If I get the photographer from the last photograph on the stand, Mr. Wilson, are you familiar with the clubhouse project at the Jenkins Country Club? I am. How are you familiar with that project? Well, I served as the superintendent on the project for the entire project, and I was there every day except for a few days during the punch list. So during all the site work, I was present. Okay. And so we've covered 2 right there. All right. Now, I'm going to hand you what has been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 7. Do you recognize this document? Yes, I do. Okay, Mr. Wilson, what is this document? This is a hard copy of a digital photo I took on, that looks sort of fallish, on October 8th at 4:53 p.m. Well, how do you know it was taken at 4:53 p.m.? Because we have a log, and we logged our photos, and then there's a way we can tell what time exactly they were taken, okay? And do you have that log with you? I do. And so then we can look at the log, or even without the log, we can say, in that case, I could use his shadow to show it was him, or he could just say he took it. That's fine. And in fact, he doesn't even have to be the person who took it to authenticate the photo. It could be somebody else out there. Okay, they can pass that test. All they have to do is be familiar with the object or scene, explain why they're familiar with the object or scene, so maybe the foreman, that they recognize the object or scene in the photo, they were there, and that the photo is an accurate depiction at the relevant time. Well, you have to know what time it was, but yes, let's use our date stamp on our cameras, and we keep those updated, and that solves that problem. So with that simple testimony, the photograph is in. And in most cases, it's so easy to get a photograph in that we won't even challenge the other person's photograph. We won't object on a foundation issue, unless we know that they don't have a witness that can do this there. That's the key. So if you're in a trial and the person who took the photograph or who was there is not present, if they're on another job, they're not going to be able to get on the stand to do this. So you may not get the photograph in. Now, we talked about the ways of telling what time a photo was taken. This is called metadata. Is there anybody who has not heard of that term? Okay, metadata is information that accompanies other information that's visible. It's kind of hidden information. So when you do a Word document, it's recorded. The computer's program is recording who's doing the work, what time they open the document, all this extraneous information about what's going on with the document. It may have information about what you changed in the document, edits, unless you clean the document. That's metadata. And it's the same thing in photographs. You're going to get this recordation of the photograph. So we have our photograph here, and I think I went into picture viewer here. for this, but they give you a little bit of information. But the information they give you is pretty important because they show the date it was created. They show, and I want to be careful here, the date created, this is a really good example, and I'm glad this came up. I know that this photograph was taken in 2006, okay? I got this photograph off of a disc and on a case, and it was part of the discovery. And my photo viewer, or whatever program I opened it with, has stated the date that I opened it is 2011. That's when the case was going on. The work was done 4 or 5 years earlier. So the lesson on this photograph is if the file is transferred or moved around, some of that metadata may change. So to really prove what time your photographs were taken, you need the seed corn file. You need the pristine server, wherever your company records the information, downloads the files, leave it alone, and then with that you can go off and crop a photograph, send it out and that type of thing. But keep the original on your files with the original metadata if you can. We also learn about the camera make and model. This is a Nikon. Oh, and here we go. I'm sorry. It did down here. It said date taken 11/1/2006 at 9:30 and 33 a.m. Okay? So don't get fooled by this created. In Picasa, a Google program, the information, and I was looking at it this morning, the information you get on Google's Picasa program is amazing. It's got like 3 times more information than this. It boggles your mind how much the computers are talking to each other. But going further here, we have some of the technical data. This says F number 4.7 and focal length, exposure time right there. These focal length, F number, and exposure times, whether a flash was used, these things can determine the quality of your photograph. I learned, I was the kind of the historian for the Beta Club when I was in middle school. And we got, Mom, Dad, I need a camera. So we got a Canon, forgot the name of it, but it was a Canon, one of the film cameras. So through that process, I learned about apertures and exposure, shutter speeds and all that. And really, you're dealing with a piece of optical equipment. So I know your superintendents aren't going to want to go learn about optics when they've got everything else to do. But the new cameras now kind of use the same system, but you only have to learn about 3 things. And most of the things that you'd have to learn about in terms of shutter speed and aperture, they have settings for. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So it really is easy now to get a good quality photograph if you just spend a little bit of time working with it. This is good stuff for authentication now because I've got a time, okay? And that was one of the tests we had before in the authentication process. You get all the photographs, you got the cameras coming back to the office, and I want to ask you all, do you all have a standardized procedure, or are the photographs kind of here and there on laptops? Does anybody have a company policy or procedure for dealing with photographs? Good. Okay. Okay. And for those of you who couldn't hear, all the photos go into a job folder, and is kept current? Okay. Great. And now, is there a narrative? Is there any place to explain what's going on in the photo?
We do have captions underneath them if required, but generally, the photo speaks for itself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's to me the real challenge I had with you all, and there's so many ways that you can do this. I mean, it's got to work though. It's got to be easy. because if you do follow a protocol for photography on jobs, you're not going to be doing it probably. It's going to be the superintendent who's just been screamed at unfairly by the GC and who's got subs hounding him about being 2.4 hours late on paying them. You got all this stuff they're dealing with. And so I would say if you do develop a protocol, make it easy and make it work with what you've got. So you want to get your IT people involved. If you have IT people, you'll want to understand where things go, how to retrieve them. The great thing about living today is, they have these the standalone data. They're almost like glorified USB drives. But they have 6 gigabytes of memory. I mean, it's just amazing. Or I don't know if they're in the terabytes yet, but you can store just the Library of Congress on it. So there is a place to put it all. Just make it easy on your people, and they'll be more likely to do it. And also, accountability, you'll want to audit them to see if they're keeping up with the photographs. Thankfully, we don't have tapes like that anymore. All right, here's another example. Here's an example of a condominium project I had last year. And the GC, the guy who came in to replace the initial GC, had a log of photos, and the way he did it was he would number each photo with a little exhibit sticker down here, and this is an excerpt, I had to cut and paste this to get this to work. Photo 25, gas-fired unit with no gas piping. Getting gas piping up on this condo project was a real challenge, and I don't recall if it was a missed spec or design issue or whether it was a fire code problem, but we had a lot of trouble getting the gas piping up there, and so you'd have HVAC units just sitting up there with no supply. And these are nice, simple descriptions. Damaged cooling fins on roof HVAC. Okay, that's photo 30, which I don't have here, but that's a nice way of doing it. Seems to me, though, that might be a little bit, a lot of heavy lifting to do it that way. I suppose this kind of photo log could be created by having the guy come back to the office or in the next morning, take the photos off the camera he's taken, make the hard copies, and then just have a little photo journal on the side. But that does seem like a lot of work. Here's a system I tried to invent just for this seminar, and this is the Madison County Library project, fictional project. These are the photos for May 5th of 2012. All right? Now, the way I did this was I put my name here, my initials, GLS, I put the time, and then I have northwest corner shows electrical sub damaging, and you can expand that out to see what. I actually did the description in the name of the file. Problem is, you got to make sure everything's right. See, because here now I have a date modified, the actual photos from February of 2012. That's when I was actually doing the work. So when I was actually creating this. So, if you're saying May 5th, 2012, which hasn't happened yet, if you're saying that the work was done on that day, then you're going to want to have consistency with the day that the photograph was taken in your metadata. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem. There are going to be questions about it. Here, the problem I see with this system, although it is easy because I'm using the file name to put my explanation in, and it's contemporaneous because I'm looking at the photo and naming it. The problem is that this photo gets moved off to somewhere else, to another party, in discovery, or to the expert witness. They may not include those file names. They may rename it. The copy service may not use those file names. It may just go back to its numbers. So that could all be lost in production. You'd still have your copy, okay? And that would be the file name. But that doesn't seem to be a perfect solution either if you do have a dispute. If you don't, this is a nice, efficient way of doing it. Okay, this is my dog Sammy, and he's called a Kazond. or Dutch barge dog, and they're bred for just watching the barges in Holland, and they have this nice big undercoat of fur that keeps them warm in that harsh climate. Well, in the spring I have to go out and brush him, and this is what I got from one brushing, which is almost bigger than he is. And here I put in Picasa, Sammy, after spring grooming to remove winter undercoat, plan to make a suit out of the wool. You can actually make wool, you can actually make garments out of Kazon fur. They and sheep are the only ones you can do that with. I'm not going to do that, though. But here we have my metadata, my description accompanying the photograph. Now, here, Picasa is nice. I guess they would be a good thing for smaller to mid-sized general contractors who want to just have a record, but it's not the most professional way of doing it. But here I am tying my narrative to the actual picture. The thing about this picture is this narrative could never make it into evidence. And I'm going to tell you why in just a second. Well, the other pictures probably would. And the problem that I'm facing with getting my narrative about Sammy into trial is called hearsay. And hearsay, the definition of hearsay, is an out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted in the statement. So pretty much everything is hearsay, unless it's somebody testifying in court. Not all statements that are made out of... Yes, ma'am. Yes, and that's a great point. That's the authentication part. The authentication part is saying, this is what it purports to be. It's real. It's not a fake letter. It's not a forged letter. It's not a doctored photograph. This is a separate issue. This now goes into, okay, Greg, fine, the letter is authentic, but you still can't bring it in here because any more than you could bring in what your sister Jane told you. If she doesn't show up in court, the other side has no way of cross-examining her. And so you could get in evidence by, hearsay by saying, well, I was told, and that's really the key for lawyers when you hear the words, he told me blank, there's going to be an objection to hearsay. Because the person who told the witness blank, the person who told the witness that they saw, a 6'8" man rob the bank, they're not there to be cross-examined. How good is their eyesight? Are they related to the actual robber and are giving false information? All those things are screened out by the courts. The courts are saying, we're just not going to let it happen. You've got to sit here in front of a jury with a lawyer cross-examining you so we know you're telling the truth. So the statement I made about Sammy's winter coat is going to be hearsay. But I do want to make a distinction about hearsay. Not all statements that are made out of court are hearsay. Okay? I'm trying to think of an example of where you could have somebody making an assertion in court about, and it's usually in the notice realm. It's usually in the notice realm. In the construction project, it is important to know when people knew of a certain situation, okay? So, or an issue. So, let's say, for example, we have a defect case and the 3-year statute of limitations is run, or one of the parties says that the 3-year statute of limitations is run, and the other party says that it hasn't. The fight there is going to be when the person knew of the problem, because the statute of limitations runs when the problem occurs or when the person knew or should have known of the problem. So, if you've got a sponge inside of you from a surgery, how are you going to know about it? Because you're sewn up and you were under anesthesia. But if you have a statement like, I lost the sponge, oh, or the sponge must be inside of the patient, and you hear it, then you're on notice of that it potentially could be inside of you. You know, whether the statement is true or not is not really important. It's whether you knew that it could be true. So there's a distinction there that comes into play with lawyers all the time. So oftentimes we'll say, it's not hearsay. I'm not offering it to show that the sponge was in there. I'm offering it to show that he knew it could have been in there. So those kinds of distinctions are, you know, frequently handled by judges, and they get very complex, very expensive. Here we have the business record exception, though. This is how we're going to get those first two reports in, the first two photographic logs. The court says, okay, we know that we're not going to let hearsay in because it's unreliable, because people could be lying. But people normally don't lie when they're trying to run a business, when they're trying to follow procedures to make their business profitable. And we can go back to those old records, and we think that they're going to be pretty valid, because it's really hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. And to have somebody make up a document in 2008 that relates to something that happened in 2011 and say that that was somehow plotted or planned, that's kind of far-fetched. You're just not going to see that. So the court has created an exception to the hearsay rule, the hearsay exclusion. Okay, remember, the court is not going to let hearsay in unless there's an exception. And the exception is this: a record of an event, condition, or opinion is not excluded if it was made at or near the time by someone with knowledge, kept in the course of a regularly conducted activity of the business, making the record was a regular practice of the business. Remember, I talked about regularly, when, regularly, that's the key. And there's no indication of a lack of trustworthiness. In other words, it's not fishy to the judge. So if we have a letter that was written at or near the time of the event, you know, your superintendent told me to install an additional row of holly trees. Okay, and that letter was written that day. And he said that there was an inspection and it had to be done, even though I don't have a change order. Okay. You send it off. If it's your regular practice to write letters like that, or to take photographs, or to videotape, you keep a log of it, and you know you're not doctoring it up, then the courts will let it in. So most of the good thing for us, for the construction attorneys, is most of the documents that are created during a project fall within this exception. All right? So that's the good news. So that's how we get your photographs in. And that's why we have that separate, this is a separate test now that we have to run to get, first it has to be authenticated, and then it has to be admitted around the hearsay exclusion. Okay. I want to talk to you now about reading photographs. We did a little bit of that earlier, and just looking at the details of the photograph, and I've taken a photograph from a case that's really narrow. I mean, not only narrow in terms of its actual width, but narrow in terms of what it's photographing. And let's read this one a little bit. Can anybody tell me when was this photograph taken? What time of day? Good. What tells you it was taken around noon? Excellent. What season are we in? Yeah. And why are we taking this photo? Does anybody have any guess why this photo was taken? And I'm asking you the impossible, because it's really impossible to tell. Well, that could be. Yeah, if they were having trouble with this guy parking there all the time, blocking spaces, then that's got him red-handed. This was more about a retaining wall and how the soil was compacted in this area, right along the backing of the wall. And this photograph was taken by an expert as an indication of whether compaction was proper, because you have these fence posts that are put in, I don't know, every It's like 20 feet or so. And he was looking at whether they were staying even. Because if there was a compaction problem, you'd have some sagging and the fence line would be kind of warped. So he took several of these photographs all along, and from down here, and took it that way. But those little details, like what time of day, those are skills you can develop and look at a photograph, and instead of just dismissing it, we get so many images thrown at us. Take the time to look at it. You'd be amazed at what you can see in a photograph. We get a case and we love looking at photographs because we usually get them later. We usually get the flood of documents first. And so when we get the photographs, it's fun to actually say, okay, that's how my mind saw the situation, but here's how it actually is. And now I can point out things and discover things and catch people in lies and all kinds of fun things with photographs. Again, we want to take photographs that are meaningful. Another wall here that should be flush, and the introduction of the tape measure, which everybody should have handy, not only shows that the wall is out of line here, but gives us a distance of about 2.5 inches. All right, that measurement is important under the design manual for retaining walls, because they have tolerances. So here we are recording where this wall sits on this day and whether it's within the tolerance of the NCMA, the Concrete Masonry Association guidelines. Here's my, we're going to move on to techniques now and how the struggles your superintendents may have taking photographs. Here's my attempt to take a photograph of a Volkswagen Audi suction pump that goes into the crankcase. The crankcase gases are recirculated through the engine, through the pollution, the emission control system. And this was a part that had failed, and I learned about it through one of the forums, online forums, and was going to show people what I'd found in my car. But the thing is, my photograph took a great picture of the grass and the leaves. And you look at this, and it could be anything. Who knows what that is? So I obviously wasn't understanding, and I didn't want to take the time to get a shot that was clear and that would make sense to people. I just kept doing the same thing over, turning flash on, getting closer, and it just would never work. So had I known about the settings, I could have adjusted the settings and gotten a better photograph. And this is one of the issues that I've learned about recently was the depth of field and the relationship with depth of field and apertures. And these apertures, these F numbers, are shown as part of the metadata on your photographs. So one of the things now that I've become more interested in digital photography, I'm not even close to some of these guys, like probably our own cameraman and the folks that are taking photographs of this event. But even with my handheld Kodak, that's similar to the kind of camera I've got. I'm learning that whether something's in focus depends a lot upon the aperture. And as your aperture increases, the aperture number increases, but the actual size decreases, that's going to affect your depth of field. So as a general rule, larger F number means wider depth of field. So you're going to get more clear photographs in that wider depth of field. So one of the things I've been doing is going into Picasa and then looking at the rows of photographs I've taken, and I'll just go through each one and try to guess the aperture, just try to get my skill up. Trying to guess at things like that is a good way of learning how to do something properly. I don't think you're going to ask your superintendents to do that probably. They're going to be too tired. But if you understand it and can teach them, that'll be very helpful to get better photographs. Same thing, this is the suction pump in 3 parts. That's the part I was showing you. Here I've put it against a white background, and if I recall, this was a very bright day. And this is using a flash, and I turned the flash off. You could probably get some information on this photograph over here, But I think this photograph with the flash gives you a little more. But nobody wants to look at a blurry photograph, you know. You've got a jury who is spending a couple of weeks on your case, and you know, you can see if there's a blurry photograph that comes up, it's an affront, and I can understand that. Who wants to have to strain? It needs to be easy. The information needs to come easily, and so you know, and I can't tell you how many blurry photographs I see on projects. Which leads us to, I talked about, you know, there are people that are very good at prepping and setting things up for litigation. There are some companies, and they usually, you know, go through, upset everybody in town, and then can't get any general contractors to work for them. I'm talking in this case about owners, but it can go, you know, any of the parties can engage in this kind of behavior where it's predatory. They're setting you up for claims. They're setting you up for change orders. They're setting you up to deny your change orders and get free work. And they know how to work the system, and they know how to document, and you don't. And you know, you're going into battle with a trained knight, you know, with a broadsword, and you've got a stick. Well, now more than ever, you can, you know, there's not so much of an asymmetrical warfare, no matter how rich or powerful the company is. Now you have technology that's kind of even things out. And so you can use your skills to fight the good fight and protect yourself. I haven't seen manipulation, doctoring a photograph in a case come out. I'm just waiting for it because it's just inevitable. But this is a photograph of General Grant, and this is, I think, a very good doctored photograph. Well, first of all, let me ask you all, what do you all think? Has anyone seen this photograph before in like the Civil War series or any of the, okay. You know, I'll tell you, I looked at it, I thought it was legitimate. This was made in 1904. This is actually a composite of 3 photographs. General Grant's face was cut out from a portrait, and I think, yeah, I know that this was a different person, the horse and the rider, but I'm going to get the name wrong. It's McCall or McCrae or something like that, but the Civil War historians are going to throw something at me. So it's someone else. And then the photograph in the back is you know, the third component. This is taken from a Civil War camp. And what he did was just pasted the head on, I'm sure used some sort of a knife or blade, and imposed Grant on the scene. And knowing that it was a manipulation, you start thinking, well, how could I have known this? Unless you're spending a lot of time on it, you probably wouldn't. But what seems to me to be strange is you've got General Grant, who's later going to become the president, and you've got these guys milling around looking that way. You know, if General Grant's going to be around, you're not going to have guys eating sandwiches on the hill behind him, most likely. You've also got right here, this, you know, if you look closely, it looks a little unnatural to be like this. In the real photograph, the rider's